You were never rejected for being wrong. You were rejected for being right too soon. You spoke when others stayed silent. You asked the questions no one else dared to ask. You saw through the game, the posturing, the pretending, the politics, and they didn't thank you. They resented you. And that's not an accident. It's a pattern, one of the oldest in human history. Carl Jung warned us that what is unconscious in a group becomes projected onto the few who dare to speak. Schopenhauer went further. He said that intellect itself is the reason thinkers are pushed to the fringes. Not arrogance, not rebellion, but awareness. Awareness that makes people uncomfortable. Awareness that sees the cracks in the culture. Awareness that reflects the truth. Others are not ready to hold. That's why intelligent people don't just intimidate, they disrupt. Not because they try to, but because their very presence challenges the unconscious norms that hold society together. And when you challenge those norms, even silently, society will resist you. Most people think society runs on ideas. It doesn't. It runs on agreement. Agreement about who we are, what matters, what should be avoided, what stories we all pretend are true. These unspoken agreements keep the machine running. And the deep thinker? They threaten those agreements simply by seeing too clearly. You don't need to say a word. You just need to exist, to hold the mirror, to see through the illusion. And in doing so, you disrupt the fragile equilibrium most people spend their lives protecting. That's why history is full of the same story, repeated. And Socrates forced to drink poison, and Hypatia murdered by a mob, and Galileo forced to recant the truth, and Van Gogh dying in obscurity, Tesla buried in debt, Turing chemically destroyed, Schopenhauer dismissed in his time. They didn't suffer because they were madmen. They suffered because they saw, and the world wasn't ready to look. Arthur Schopenhauer was brutally honest about this. He believed that intelligence was not a gift, but a curse. Not because it lacks value, but because society values comfort more than truth. Because the truth, it hurts. To truly think is to challenge, to question, to dissect. And when you do that, you expose everything built on illusion, and people don't thank you for that. They turn on you. They label you difficult, too intense, too much. But what they really mean is, you make me confront something I'm not ready to face. That is the burden of the deep thinker. And Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat it. He said the higher your intellect, the more likely you are to become unsocial. Not because you don't want connection, but because connection built on pretense will never satisfy a mind built for truth. The mirror effect. Why your intelligence triggers insecurity in others. Most people are not afraid of intelligence in theory. They admire it from a distance. They quote it. They repost it. They wear it like an accessory. But when they encounter it in real time, when someone deeply intelligent stands in front of them, calmly speaking what they've never dared to say aloud, something primal happens. They flinch. They deflect. They dismiss. They walk away. Why? Because real intelligence is not a spotlight. It's a mirror. And mirrors make people uncomfortable. Not because the thinker is cruel, but because their presence reveals something unspoken. What you're not ready to face. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. When someone embodies a truth, a depth, a clarity that you haven't yet accessed, it doesn't always inspire you. Sometimes it threatens you. And intelligence, especially philosophical intelligence, is threatening in a way nothing else is. If someone is stronger than you admire their strength. If someone is richer, you might envy their wealth. But if someone is smarter, more aware, more perceptive, more precise, you feel exposed. Not because they said anything wrong, but because they see what others don't. And being seen is terrifying when you've spent your whole life hiding from yourself. This is the paradox Schopenhauer understood. The deep thinker does not just know more. They activate more. They make others feel what they haven't yet processed. And most people will do anything to avoid that discomfort. Think about it. You've probably felt this before. You share a deep insight, and the room goes silent. You offer a perspective that cuts to the heart of a problem, and someone changes the subject. You ask a question that requires depth, and suddenly the atmosphere turns awkward. That's not you being too much. That's you brushing up against someone's psychological defenses, because most people aren't resisting you. They're resisting what you represent. They see in you the evidence of what they haven't examined. They hear in your words the challenge to their own certainty. And instead of being curious, they become reactive. This is why intelligent people are often lonely. Not because they can't connect, but because their natural mode of being, inquiry, clarity, observation, exposes the shallow ground most people stand on. And people don't forgive that easily. Schopenhauer warned, the more you understand, the harder it is to relate, because your very way of seeing the world requires discomfort. And society is built on avoiding discomfort. The mirror effect is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to understand, because once you see it clearly, you stop internalizing the rejection. You stop shrinking to be palatable. You stop dumbing yourself down for connection. Instead, you become selective. You learn who can meet you. You stop offering depth to those who haven't earned the silence it takes to receive it. Why intelligence is more threatening than strength, beauty, or wealth, and always has been. Imagine this. You walk into a room and meet someone stronger than you. Their body language, their posture, the way they carry themselves, all signal power. And yet, you don't feel threatened. You might even feel protected, inspired. You meet someone more beautiful than you, sharp features, radiant energy, confidence in every glance. And still, you admire. You don't feel attacked. Even when someone is far wealthier, the reaction isn't panic, it's fascination. You're curious. You wonder how they did it. Maybe you feel a tinge of envy, but it's distant, detached. But intelligence? That's different. Because intelligence doesn't just exist, it impacts. It reaches into the unseen. It questions what others haven't questioned. It turns the lights on in rooms people didn't even know they were sitting in. And when that light hits, most don't say, wow, thank you for showing me that. They say, who do you think you are? Because unlike beauty or strength, which are admired as traits, intelligence is tied to identity. It challenges what others believe to be true about themselves. And when your very presence causes someone to doubt their worldview, their choices, or their self-worth, they don't admire you, they reject you. Schopenhauer called this the burden of intellect. He wrote, ordinary people are only concerned with the outer appearance of things, while the intelligent concern themselves with the essence. This essence, the invisible structure behind every lie, every system, every cultural performance, is what deep thinkers are wired to see. And that makes them dangerous, not because they mean to be, but because truth, real, unfiltered truth, does not ask for permission. It reveals itself. And when it does, it forces confrontation. That confrontation, it triggers people in a way no external trait ever could. Because intelligence doesn't just shine light, it shatters illusions. And illusions are what most people live in. Illusions of safety, simplicity, certainty. The deep thinker walks in and, with a single sentence, a single gaze, or a single silence, disrupts that illusion. And that disruption feels like threat, not physical, psychological. This is why, as Schopenhauer explained, intelligent people become unsocial. Because the more aware you are, the more friction you encounter. In group settings, your insights are seen as arrogance, your questions as attacks, your nuance as confusion. You don't fit, not because you're flawed, but because you see too much. And seeing too much in a world built on pretending is always punished first and praised later. Why the deep thinker's presence feels like an attack, even when they say nothing. You don't need to say a single word. Just being in the room, being who you are, is enough to shift the energy. You feel it before anyone says anything, the glances, the sudden awkwardness, the subtle edge in someone's tone. Why? Because your presence alone carries disruption, not the loud, aggressive kind, the quiet, destabilizing kind, the kind that calls people back into awareness. And they don't want to go there. Carl Jung called it shadow projection. Arthur Schopenhauer called it alienation. Modern psychology calls it threat detection. But the experience is universal. The deep thinker walks in, and others subconsciously tighten, not because they've been attacked, but because something inside them has been touched. Here's the reason. Most people define themselves by their worldview, not by truth, not by presence, but by the ideas they inherited and never examined. So, when someone arrives who has examined them, who has torn apart beliefs, questioned assumptions, and faced hard truths, it doesn't matter if they speak or stay silent. They radiate something different, and difference feels dangerous in tribal settings. It's biological, it's neurological, it's ancient. Your brain evolved to keep you alive, not enlightened. And for most of human history, survival meant blending in, not standing out, not seeing too much, not questioning the tribe. This is why Schopenhauer said that intelligent people would always be outsiders, because they cannot unsee what others work so hard to ignore. And when you can't unsee, you can't fully belong. You can connect, you can relate, you can even love, but you cannot unknow. And that knowledge isolates, even in a crowd. And if this content is making sense to you, then click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Because the truth is, your isolation isn't a flaw. It's a signal, a signpost that you're no longer willing to betray your depth to be digestible. You've stopped asking shallow rooms to understand your depth. You've stopped editing your thoughts to keep others comfortable. You've stopped craving connection that demands you amputate your insight. You didn't lose the world. You found yourself. And from that place, you'll start to find others who live there too. Why society celebrates intelligence only in hindsight, never in real time. Galileo was called a heretic. Socrates was sentenced to death. Van Gogh died in poverty. Tesla died alone. Turing died in disgrace. And yet, today, they're icons, legends, cultural treasures, studied, quoted, worshipped, but not when it mattered, not when they were alive, not when they were speaking truth that made people uncomfortable. Why? Because society does not celebrate intelligence when it challenges. It only celebrates it when it confirms what people are already ready to accept. Arthur Schopenhauer knew this. He wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. And what people can't see, they reject. What they don't understand, they mock. What threatens their stability, they erase." Society doesn't resist intelligence. It resists what intelligence reveals. And what it often reveals is that we've been living in a fantasy, a comfortable one, a necessary one perhaps, but a fantasy all the same. Truth is rarely beautiful when it first arrives. It's messy, it's threatening, it breaks things, it asks questions that don't have clean answers. And deep thinkers are often the ones who carry that truth. Across time, across resistance, across heartbreak. But they rarely get thanked for it while they're alive. Instead, society waits. It waits until the discomfort has faded, until the genius has been softened, packaged, branded, until the truth has been sterilized enough to be safe. Then, and only then, do they celebrate. But the thinker, they lived the pain, they bore the weight, they held the insight alone while others looked away. This is why Schopenhauer, and many who followed, warned that being intelligent is a lonely path, not because you want to be isolated, but because truth is heavy and few are willing to carry it beside you. So what does that mean for you? It means this, and don't wait for validation to speak. Don't wait for celebration to think clearly. Don't dilute your depth so it fits into today's comfort zones. Because while society may not applaud you now, it may build monuments to your thinking later. But your job is not the monument, it's the message. Why simplicity sells and depth gets silenced, especially in the age of algorithms. We live in the age of attention, not reflection, not understanding, just attention. And in this world, the loudest voice wins, not the wisest, not the clearest, just the one that cuts through the noise fast enough to trigger emotion before thought. Simplicity isn't just preferred, it's profitable. And algorithms are designed to feed you what's profitable. Catchy headlines, one-sentence takes, short videos, outrage clips, memes, and what gets lost in that flood? Depth. Because depth takes time, depth takes silence. Depth requires effort, and effort doesn't scale. Not when the system is built to reward speed, emotion, and predictability. Schopenhauer, though centuries ahead of the internet, predicted this phenomenon in essence. He understood that people would always choose what feels good over what challenges them. He knew that intellect, true original intellect, was not just rare, but unmarketable in a society addicted to ease. Today, this truth plays out at scale. The content that gets the most views, the simplified answers, viral outrage, and pop psychology soundbites, and motivational fluff repackaged as depth. Meanwhile, the thinkers, the analysts, the ones asking real questions, they're buried, not because they're wrong, but because the structure isn't built for them. It's built for retention, not reflection, for engagement, not enlightenment. This is the modern evolution of what Schopenhauer described. Society now doesn't just ignore intelligence, it algorithmically buries it. So, what happens to the deep thinker in this environment? They hesitate. They feel invisible. They begin to wonder if they're crazy or just too early. They watch others go viral for saying half-truths with full confidence, while their own nuanced insights sit unread, unshared, unheard. And yet, their work becomes the blueprint after the noise dies down. Their thinking shapes what becomes mainstream years later. Because intelligence may not win the moment, but it often defines the movement. This is the paradox you must understand. When simplicity sells, intelligence spreads slowly. Truth always costs more than comfort. So if you're thinking deeply and wondering why the world doesn't respond, it's not because your thoughts aren't valuable, it's because they require stillness, and stillness is the one thing society is starving for, but afraid to touch. What to do when the world isn't ready for your mind? Schopenhauer's strategy for outsiders. You've probably asked yourself, if society resists depth, if people avoid truth, if intelligence leads to alienation, then what's the point? Why think deeply at all? Arthur Schopenhauer asked the same question. He lived it. His ideas were ignored in his lifetime. His books gathered dust. His insights dismissed as pessimism. And yet, today he's considered one of the clearest, most piercing minds in all of Western philosophy. So what did he do differently? He stopped waiting for society to validate his mind. He stopped wasting energy trying to fit into systems that were never built for people like him. Instead, he forged another path, the path every deep thinker must eventually choose. Will embrace solitude, preserve your energy, and speak where you'll be heard, even if that audience is small. Study not just people, but patterns. And most of all, stop offering your depth to those who haven't earned it. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence wasn't meant for mass consumption. It was meant for precision, for clarity, for influence over time, not popularity in the moment. He said, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. If he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is truly free." This wasn't a call for isolation. It was a reminder. Most of society is built to distract you from your own mind. If you want to hear your truth, you need quiet. If you want to build your intellect, you need space. So, what should the deep thinker do in a world that rewards shallow noise? Stop performing. Stop simplifying your soul. 1. Start creating for truth, not for clicks. And share your ideas where they can take root, not where they'll be trampled. Because your job isn't to be understood by everyone. Your job is to speak clearly enough that the right ones find you. You don't need millions of listeners. You need resonance. You don't need endless applause. You need one person who says, "That changed how I see the world." That is impact. That is legacy. That is how intelligence endures. Why the world needs deep thinkers, even if it doesn't know it yet. The world doesn't celebrate deep thinkers while they're alive, but it needs them more than it admits. It's deep thinkers who see patterns before they form, who question what others accept, who walk away from the noise, not to escape, but to understand. It's deep thinkers who hold a candle through darkness, who warn of collapse before it comes, who carry wisdom no one asks for, until it's the only thing that makes sense. Arthur Schopenhauer was right. Intelligence often leads to loneliness, but it also leads to liberation, because when you see clearly, you no longer chase applause, you no longer shape your truth to fit someone else's comfort. You no longer try to be digestible to those who haven't even started chewing on their own thoughts. Instead, you speak with precision. You choose your circle carefully. You stop performing intelligence and start living it. Because intelligence, at its core, is not about IQ. It's about insight, about how willing you are to face discomfort, to trade certainty for curiosity, to say "I don't know" instead of pretending, to sit in nuance when the world screams for simplicity. If that's you, if you've ever been the quiet one in the room who saw everything, if you've ever felt too awake, too aware, too much, you are not broken. You are not arrogant. You are not alone. You are part of a lineage, a sacred chain of minds who were rejected in life but revered in history. Socrates, Galileo, Turing, Hypatia, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, they walked alone so that others could eventually walk freely. You might not get celebrated now. You might not go viral. You might not be understood. But one day, someone will read your words, hear your voice, find your work, and everything will click for them. You don't need the whole world to understand you, just the right ones. So don't water yourself down. Don't stop thinking deeply. Don't stop questioning. Because while the world may fear what you carry, it also depends on it. If you made it this far, you're not just watching, you're remembering, returning, reclaiming your inner ground. So trust that the video YouTube shows you next, the one appearing now, is not random. It's the next doorway, the next layer, and it will meet you exactly where you are. If this resonated, take a moment to subscribe. Drop a comment below, not for the algorithm, but to mark this chapter in your journey. We'll see you in the next depth. Depthoria continues.